Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about something we've all felt at some point, that spark of defiance. But what really drives us to rebel, and what are the huge, world-changing consequences? From massive historical revolutions to the protests we see organized online, rebellion truly shapes our world. So today, let's get into it. Let's explore what it means, deep down, to just say no.
The philosopher Albert Camus gave us this really powerful way to think about it. For him, rebellion wasn't just about tearing things down. It was actually an act of creation. See, when one person finally stands up and says no to oppression, they're not just doing it for themselves. They are, whether they know it or not, fighting for a shared value, for a human dignity that connects every single one of us. It's in that moment of rebellion that we find out who we are.
And really, it all starts with that, the human no. It's that critical moment when a person or a whole group of people looks at some injustice and says, all right, that's it, this far and no further. And this isn't just about rejecting something. It's a powerful declaration that a line, a really important one, has been crossed. And now there's a shared value at stake for everyone.
Okay, but here's the big question, right? When does that feeling, that impulse to say no, actually become a legitimate right, or maybe even a moral duty? I mean, this is a question philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, and it gets right to the heart of how we even build our societies.
So this slide just lays it all out. Two totally different ways of looking at people and government. On one side, you've got Thomas Hobbes. Now, he lived through a brutal civil war and basically came to the conclusion that people are naturally selfish. He thought that to avoid a life that was, in his words, nasty, brutish, and short, we had to give up all our freedom to an absolute ruler in exchange for safety. So for Hobbes, rebellion was a big no-no. It would just lead right back to chaos. But then you've got John Locke. He had a much more optimistic view. He thought people were reasonable, and that the only reason to have a government was to protect our rights. And if it fails to do that, well, then the people absolutely have the right to rebel.
And Locke's entire argument, the whole thing, hinged on this incredible idea of natural rights. These weren't things a king or a government gave you. Nope. These were rights you were born with. Period. In his view, the entire reason we even form societies and governments in the first place is to build a system that protects these rights for everybody.
And you can see how Locke's ideas really laid the groundwork for what we now call civil disobedience. Thinkers like Henry David Thoreau built right on top of that, arguing that our first duty is to what's right, not just what's legal. And then centuries later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took this idea and just articulated it so powerfully. He explained that we actually have a moral responsibility to break unjust laws, to create a kind of non-violent tension that forces society to finally look in the mirror and confront its own problems.
But, and this is a really big but, while these ideas give us a moral playbook for defiance, the act of rebellion itself is full of danger. This brings us to the core of the problem, what we can call the rebel's paradox. It's this deep, scary warning that the fight against a monster can sometimes create a new one.
Camus, again, just nailed this terrifying risk. When you tear down the old, oppressive order, whether that's a king, a dictator, or even the idea of God, the rebel is suddenly left standing in a power vacuum. And the temptation to step in, to fill that void and become the new source of absolute truth and power, well, it's enormous. And often, it's just too much to resist.
This quote, wow, it just perfectly illustrates that tragic cycle. Camus uses the myth of Prometheus, the hero who stole fire from the gods to give to mankind. But in this warning, the liberator becomes the dictator. He starts out saving people, but he ends up controlling them, turning into the very thing he fought against. The hero, Prometheus, is gone. In his place is a tyrant Caesar. And you can see this pattern play out in revolutions all throughout history.
Now, to really understand just how profoundly a revolution can change everything, we need to step away from politics for just a second. There's this amazing idea from the history of science that gives us a perfect model for this kind of total change.
A science historian named Thomas Kuhn came up with this term, paradigm shift. And what he showed was that a true revolution, whether it's in science or in a society, isn't just about changing who's in charge. It's about changing the entire rulebook, the accepted truths, the very way you see the world. It's kind of like rewriting a society's entire operating system from the ground up.
So Kuhn broke it down into 4 steps. You start with normal science, a time when everyone agrees on the rules. But then anomalies start popping up. These are problems the old system just can't seem to solve. In a society, this could be things like massive inequality or injustice. Pretty soon, enough of these anomalies stack up to create a crisis. People just lose faith in the old way of doing things. And that, right there, is when the door swings open for a revolution, for a totally new way of seeing the world to take hold.
So let's bring this all into the here and now. How does this all play out today? Well, technology, and I'm talking specifically about the internet and social media, has completely changed the game for what it means to rebel.
I mean, on the one hand, these tools are basically a rebel's dream come true. Social media lets people organize massive protests on a scale we've never seen before. It creates what some people are calling a fifth estate, giving a global megaphone to groups who were once totally voiceless. Information and outrage can literally spread around the world in minutes, putting incredible pressure on governments and powerful people.
But there is a really serious dark side. The same algorithms that connect us can also trap us in filter bubbles and echo chambers, just fueling more and more polarization. They can actually push users toward more extreme content, leading people down paths of radicalization. And as these online movements explode in size, their original careful message can get watered down or lost in just raw populist anger. Not to mention, new kinds of nonviolent rebellion, like huge data leaks, can end up causing real harm to innocent people who get caught in the middle.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to the rebels' timeless and incredibly urgent dilemma. Look, rebellion is essential. It's how we make progress, how we fight injustice, how we affirm our shared humanity. But it's like walking on a razor's edge. The question for every generation, for every single rebel, is always the same. How do we fight for a better world without becoming the very monsters we're trying to destroy? Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it and learned something from it, or if you want to share your own opinion or experience, please comment down below. I would love to see your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you get notified when I upload more videos like this one. Have a good day. Bye.